I love this class. It's my favorite class of the week. Don't tell my other students that. Don't say anything. I mean, the thing I love all the classes. The thing I love about this one is it's just a brainstorm. It's just, you know, we explore, we question. You guys challenge me, which I love. And it gets me out of my comfort zone because I don't have an agenda other than talking about that particular practice, right? So it challenges me, and sometimes I may say things that I'll regret later, you know. But now I've got video proof.
Right.
So, what have you guys noticed the past week? So we're working with lungs, and since we're going to continue, we're going to stay with lungs. I was going to move into kidneys early, so we'd have a couple of weeks to think about it while we were off, but we're not. Kidneys will start. We'll probably start next Friday because solstice is Saturday, and that's when the transition is from metal. Fall to winter kidneys, so metal lung, fall, winter kidneys, water element. So we'll start exploring water element next week. So what did you guys notice this week related to lungs, related to fall, related to breath, boundaries, all of that we've been working on? Frequencies. I can wait all day.
I notice I haven't been breathing as deeply as I would like to.
You haven't been breathing as deep?
Yeah, it seems like the breath power doesn't seem to be there. It's just not, it's not full and complete. Even when I'm doing Qigong, for instance, it feels like it's not quite enough.
Are you able to engage the Dantian breath?
Yeah, when I do that one that you showed me down here, yes.
The 6 direction breath?
Where you go to the back of your back, yeah, I like that one. But that's a much deeper breath. When I'm just breathing slowly and gently, it seems like there's not a whole lot of, I don't know what, it just doesn't draw in that. I draw into a certain point and that's as far as it goes, and it wants to go the other way.
Okay.
But it doesn't happen all the time.
Nothing happens all the time. But,
Well, no, it's not the predominant way you're breathing.
It's
just
persistent, but it's not consistent.
Yeah, that's sort of what
it seems like, I just notice a general tendency of not feeling like I have as full a breath under normal circumstances as I would like.
I had the same thing, and I thought it was the dryness from the air, and then the elasticity of my lungs weren't drawing. You know, if the elasticity of my lungs are affected, then you know I'm not drawing in as well. But I don't know if it's a winter thing or a fall thing. I mean, as far as temperature.
Well, temperatures can make a big difference. So, like optimum oxygen uptake is around 60%, 65% humidity and 65 degrees. So when we hit that, we're like, oh, I can breathe. It's got all this oxygen working for us. It's rich oxygen in the air. When we have different temperatures, variations, humidity levels and such, it impacts the integrity of the oxygen in the air. It impacts the amount of oxygen that's in the air. This isn't Qigong training, this is jet mechanics and aircraft mechanics training. But it still applies. The lung capacity issue can come, you know, the reason I drew this on the board is because it can come from a physical, mechanical restriction. Posture can affect it. So we're, you know, if I'm protecting my heart or I'm slouched forward, the mechanics of my lungs are going to have trouble expanding. And even if I'm doing belly breath, it's going to be limited in scope because I'm compressing. So mechanically it can be that. It can be mechanical tension in my chest, but that can come from the anxiety, right? Racing thoughts, triggering an excitation or anxiety, and that starts to feel tightness in the chest. This is where, in the extreme, we start to look at like panic attack kind of stuff, where it starts to ramp up. Typically there's a shallow, tight breath, a tightness in the chest, a constriction at the throat, and all of a sudden it's like, and then boom, you're gone, right? So it's a great observation. The question becomes, and you don't have to answer this right now, but the question becomes, what is causing that? What is it? The other thing that can be involved is depression, and I'm not labeling this for you, Dave, I'm just saying in general, depression can do that. So if you think about how the mental, emotional, physical all interact, if I have a physical restriction for the breath, that's one. If I have emotional constrictions, you know, where if I'm really feeling heavy, this time of year seasonally can really bring polarity. I can have people that are very overjoyed at the holiday season, and then other people that are just really, really heavy. I text and touch base with clients that all of a sudden are getting quiet on me and say, hey, where are you, how you doing? Because this can be a really challenging time of the year for people. In that, if I have this emotional heaviness, it definitely will weigh on the chest. And it's like, whatever. We get that lethargic breath going. Does that make sense? So, what? So, clearly that, well, it's kind of a double-edged sword. If you guys come in wound up, then we get a really active class, but if we start with Qigong, then we're like, okay, everybody's, let's just have a snack. I had it wasn't in the outpatient clinic, it was behavioral health hospital, this was years ago, but I had a guy, we did, you know, some good breath work and such, and afterwards he was like, to the class, to the group, he's like, man, that's better than smoking pot. It's like, thanks for letting me know. So does that help any, Dave? I mean, ideally what you're looking for is, you know, we're looking at lungs, we're looking at breath, and we talk about that trigger pattern tool scenario of, you know, we get triggered into something and then a pattern shows up, and could the pattern be tightness in the chest, a shallow, tight breath, a feeling of restlessness or anxiety coming up, the heart is getting excited, you know, something has triggered, and then the pattern is maybe to feel overwhelmed, and then as I feel overwhelmed, then these emotions and such start to churn up on me, and all of a sudden I'm feeling physical symptomology from this mental and emotional patterning. Does that make sense? So the breath can be a really good way to get the deep abdominal breathing can be a good way to bring things down, but we still have to go in and say, where is this coming from? What's going on here? I need to, once I've settled, if I don't do anything with the breath work, other than the breath work, then I'm simply treating the symptoms and I'm waiting for the next time I get triggered. I've done nothing more than that. Yeah, Richard.
Speak about, if you would, after the calming of the breath, then investigating or asking where this is going on from, what's causing this. Would you speak about the importance of cause awareness and the steps of working with cause?
We're not looking to create blame. We're looking for understanding.
Okay.
Right? So if I go back and I say this, I'll just use me as an example, the anger that I feel because of bullying, because of stuff that happened to me as a kid. If I get triggered, somebody trying to bully me and the anger comes up and all of that, I can just say, well, it's because of that. And I can just leave it at that and just blame that. I was bullied, I was violently abused as a kid, you know, people outside my family that created that environment where I won't let that happen again. So the trigger is somebody pushing me around,
Right.
trying to impose their will. The pattern is feeling vulnerable, and I don't ever want to feel vulnerable again. So I will come out with force. So the tool for me is anger, pushing into that, and basically setting a hard boundary that they need to back off, right?
Okay.
If I don't do anything else, and they back off, or I sedate them. The threat is gone. I am just sitting here idle, waiting for the next time. Nothing has changed. With me? What I want to do is stop that and basically create a route down to say, where is this coming from really? Now, it took me a long time to describe the pattern that I'm just talking about, where I recognize that somebody trying to impose their will on me makes me feel bullied, and then I want to fight back. That took a long time to evolve to try and find the cause. The cause was feeling really vulnerable as a young child, having significant physical injuries because of the bullying, created this patterning inside me. Now, if I just blame what happened then and I do nothing else, it's not going to solve anything. I want to be able to recognize, okay, this pattern, this triggers somebody, let's just say bully,
Gotcha.
runs the pattern, victim. Okay, I'm a victim, I no longer want to be a victim, so no more victim. So now I become the aggressor, so the tool becomes aggression.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And once that's happened, then I'm good. Assuming they back down. One of us is good. One of us is good. So with that, now if I recognize, okay, the bullying is what's causing this, if I can lay out this pattern for myself and I see it as clearly as I see it now. Now for anybody in here that hasn't done this work, it's going to be hard, but this is the framework that we use. So now I have all these instances, skull fractures, hair pulled out, pushed out of a moving car, all these different things that happen to me that I can go back and say, these are all examples of this same pattern.
Okay.
And all of them made me feel victimized. And all of this is actually fuel that makes this a much stronger response. But once I've understood this, and I've done, each of these, I had to do some healing work on. I had to go in and work to release the anger, the resentment, the whatever was the fear, whatever was in my being, I had to go in and resolve that. I had to come to a place of peace with these moments in time, these events. Once I've done that, then what happens is I end up with a decision block here. Because understanding gives way or gives me the opportunity to make a choice. When I get triggered, if I don't have this awareness, if I don't understand where this is coming from for me, it's just going to happen. It's just going to, boom, come in and blow up because it's got all this fuel behind it. But once I
And all
have...
that fuel is blaming fuel, it sounds like to me.
Sorry?
All that fuel that you talked about was blaming fuel, things that happened to you and all that. I mean,
I'm listening.
I don't see where the understanding comes in.
The understanding is that, so, the kid that hit me across the top of the head with a shovel,
Yeah,
split my head open,
yeah.
okay? You wanna feel it?
And then what are you gonna do with
Wow.
it after that? That's before you get back to the trigger again.
Well, that happened, so that event happened, right? I was 5, 5.5, something 6, somewhere in between 5 and 6. So that happened. What do I do with it as an adult? When it was under the covers, it was just sitting there waiting. It's just pressure, it's anger, it's resentment, it's fear, it's feeling victim. It's just this feeling underneath. Yes? Does that make sense? It's like part of the pressure cooker. So it's just sitting there waiting for somebody to do it again. Right? So it could be somebody coming at me to hand me a shovel without ill intent that could trigger me into, what the fuck do you think you're doing? You need to back up, right? Do you see what I mean? It doesn't have to be a violent act. It could be something that I'm reminded of within that particular act. Now, what I had to do for me with this particular kid, because I couldn't find him, is come to a place of peace, recognizing that that's who he was at that point in time. So if you think about our model of anger, because it was anger on one level and compassion. Right? In our model of 5-element practice, we're looking at the balance between anger and compassion. If I have a lot of unresolved anger, the way to nurture that anger into a settled space is to strengthen the compassion around it. And so for me, what I had to do was come to a place of understanding that with the work I've done with so many people in behavioral health, I've seen a lot of abuse victims, adult men that were abused as kids, that came from households that would cause this kid to behave this way. Does that make sense? So now all of a sudden, instead of saying he's just a bully, I could say, wow, he must have had it really hard that he felt like he had to take his anger out on me. Because that one kid fractured this orbital bone, split my head open, and almost took this eye with a stick. So
Was he the same age?
he was a next door neighbor. No, he was about 6 years older than me. I think he was 11 or 12, and I was 6, 7, 5, 6, 7.
What I'm getting is,
I did go look for him, by the way.
I'm getting a different perspective of understanding. One is a cognitive understanding. I'm triggered. I'm real aware of the history where it came. I'm getting a second level understanding. I'm triggered. I know my history. And now I'm not a victim of that history. I'm a creator of how I engage this moment. I'm a choice maker with an understanding of my history, but I have a new experience of me this moment.
The challenge with that, and this is a big difference between Western therapeutic modalities and Eastern therapeutic, energetic therapeutic modalities, is that in Western therapeutics, we may come in and we can reason right here, and we can come into a justification model to say, that was then, this is now, right? But that doesn't resolve how I felt about it or any trauma to the body that was experienced in the process.
I mean something different. Not just an awareness of then and now. The way I experience the emotions of where I am now.
Mm-hmm.
The way I work in the here now with my feelings. The way I work with the way I connect to my experience now. It's not just a cognitive about, it's an internal shift of the way I connect to my experience.
Yes, yes.
That's the distinction that allows choice.
Right, and that's where we get into integration.
Okay.
Right? I want to integrate the experience, come to a place of peace with it, so that it no longer hurts me.
And not only that.
And that's in this particular case, there was a lot of anger that I had to build compassion for who that child
Right.
was at that
Right.
point in time, to feel so much anger inside him that he needed to lash out. There was also the other component of fear that I felt as a child, and we balanced that with wisdom. And wisdom is very different than knowledge. So wisdom means that I have embodied the understanding.
Yeah.
Right? It's coming through my whole being that I know this about myself, or I know this about this situation.
So that's the embodied shift,
Yes,
which allows a new choice.
yes. So once I have that integration, then this understanding, and or maybe a better word would be embodiment.
I think so, because it implies the thoughts, the feelings, and the here now experience rather than something I'm aware about a pattern.
Correct. So let's just scratch understanding. I'll start using embodiment. Thank you for that, Richard. So the embodiment of this experience that triggered me gives me the opportunity to have a choice window here. So that when something comes in, because in my understanding, in my own personal experience, triggers don't go away.
No.
They don't go away. Because they are deeply set in the brain.
Call from +1972.
Sorry, how did you put airplane mode in here? I'm starting to cut me off.
Boy, that got me triggered. I was like, I need to get the phone.
Yeah.
So, by creating that embodiment, you know, when we're just talking about one bullying incident, and let's say, for the sake of argument, you know, there was a bunch of different events that I would label as bullying. So we're picking one right here, right? It may not be the oldest one that I can remember, but it is one that was very impactful for me. So when I create this integration, this embodiment, then I'm given an opportunity to create a choice. So when this trigger shows up, I can come in and say, is this about me?
Right.
Because if it's about me, I want to use my skills, my
Yeah.
tools, or my gun, whatever. But if it's not about me, which 99 times out of 100 it isn't, I can say, no, it's not about me, and I can let it go. Yeah.
I'm really excited that last week it was very helpful, and I thank the presidents of the class. Because I had a very challenging event this week, and I embodied the connection to the event, night and day different.
Nice.
Yeah,
In a good way, I assume.
yeah,
Good.
yeah, I felt the emotions of what I wish could have been different, had the compassion for self and other. But I didn't feel the shame or that it was about me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And that's what we're looking for, is a grounded awareness and a grounded response to a circumstance that maybe feels overwhelming to our historic being.
Yeah.
So let's say I've got this embodiment of a particular event that was really painful and difficult in my life. Now I have an awareness here. So let's say this one has become grounded. It hasn't gone away, it's become part of who I am. But now it can become part of the best parts of who I am. So what this does is, now other events that have a similar frequency, and if you think about this as a frequency, a signatured frequency, bullying for me resonates at a certain level. I can notice when somebody has that bullying energy. Does that make sense?
Sure.
We all have those spidey senses that come in when something doesn't feel right. And so, and a lot of those are related to our triggers. The alarm, so triggers basically, what are triggers? Triggers are alarm bells that have been set by our being to warn us ahead of time of something that was very difficult or painful prior.
Beautiful.
It's just an alarm. And so if I'm, you know, me and my hunting buddy, I'm a primal man, Homo sapien, whatever, no, Homo erectus, what, I don't know. I'm not an anthropologist. Caveman. So I'm walking through the woods. My buddy's with me. Large creature. I hear snap, crackle, pop, roar, boom. My buddy's gone. I had squirted honey on him beforehand. That's going to traumatize me. And And what happens in the human brain when that goes on is all 5 senses are registered as triggers. Basically, all 5 senses get registered in a different part of the brain that is high definition. It is intense. Your smell, your taste, the sounds, how your body felt, the clothes you were wearing will have an impact on that. Everything in your sensory awareness on all 5 levels of senses, we're not even talking about other senses, but 5 levels of senses are going to be registered in that moment instantly and basically say, this is an alarm, this is an alarm, this is an alarm. And they may, at that point in time, that becomes part of my registered memory, deep memory. It's different than our cognitive memory.
Right.
This is the primal memory. It's a different memory center. So with that, anytime I hear, let's say, a particular density of wood snapped prior to this, it's not like any twig breaking, but this made a distinct noise, and I heard it from over here, okay, right prior to the event. Now, anytime I'm in the woods, first of all, just being in the woods is going to be, this is going to alarm, it's going to just kind of wake up and say, hey, remember, be mindful, pay attention. And then all of a sudden I hear a twig snap over this way, boom, my hearing has come in and said, hey, pay attention. So now what's going to happen? My whole body is going into this patterning that was established, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a survival mechanism. Triggers are survival mechanisms. Plain and simple. Where I see, spending so much time in behavioral health and at the VA hospital and working with military, working with cops and all of that, and working with myself, if I haven't learned anything else, it's that triggers are not bad. They just are. They're not there to punish us. They're there to protect us. In the case of painful or difficult triggers, triggers that are connected to a trauma memory. They're there to protect us. The more we try to numb them, drown them, ignore them, compartmentalize them, block them, rationalize them, avoid them, anytime we're trying to get away from them, whatever pharmacology or anything psychological that we're trying to push them down, well, I'm not being bullied anymore. I shouldn't have that trigger. I've had veterans come to me and say, my therapist told me I should get over it because I'm not in the jungle anymore, or I'm not in the sand anymore. That is utter bullshit.
There's no free will. They don't have on that topic for them.
At that moment in time, if you think about the way the brain is structured, you've got, and I'm not an anatomist, this area here is the old part, connected directly to the nervous system. This area up here is the new part that thinks and reasons and plans and organizes. It's executive function. It's the newest part of the human brain. This is the oldest and most primal. This is where that lives. This is where trauma memory triggers live. This is the alarm system, because this system operates almost, I'll give you the actual number, 3.7 times faster than the cognitive reasoning brain. It's almost 4 times faster. So if we heard a loud noise, like I had a veteran I worked with for a long time, his forward operating base, his position, was mortared every day for 6 months. Every day, and they didn't know when, but he knew it was going to happen. 6 months. They'd hear a mortar land, and then they would take cover. So now if he hears a book drop, he's under a table. Well, he's embarrassed. He feels shame, guilt. He's a big, tough soldier. I mean, he's a career soldier. I know this guy. He's a wonderful being, tough as nails. been through hell and back multiple times on multiple continents. And so with that, there's no challenging his ability to defend himself and protect himself. But in that moment, this part of the brain took over and said, gotta go. Been here before, gotta go. All right, does that make sense? Now, so I'm trying to remember the millisecond range, but in less than a second, or let's just for fudge factor, less than 2 seconds, one deep breath, we can bring the cognitive reasoning brain back online and say, oh, that was just a book. But in that instant, not happening, not going to happen.
There's also another part of the brain I've been studying that I think really integrates with this practice. Is the prefrontal cortex. That part of the brain in mindfulness starts to increase its speed of reactivity for compassionate mindfulness. So when a trigger happens, it's not just I'm out of danger or I'm trapped. The prefrontal cortex, even slower than the limbic, has the ability to shift before the cortex and get a compassionate presence of your moment.
Well, that's what this is about. That's what coming to a place of peace with this is.
Yes.
This is the cognitive process coming in and working with and releasing the pressure of the threat.
Yeah.
Perceived threat.
Yeah.
And once that happens, then it does, the fuel is not there in the same capacity, in the same intensity. And so it's not such a rapid and overwhelming response.
Right. The prefrontal embodies it.
Yes. Yes.
So now you have a whole new system, not just awareness, fright. You have a third system that says, I'm connected to the awareness of me and others at this moment. That gives me a sense of observing, not being traumatized or reacting. It's a developed skill too.
It is a trained skill.
Yeah.
It is a resolution of old pain.
Yeah.
It is coming to a different place of perspective with it. But again, these are not going to go away. They just take on a different role. I mean, for me, I've shared this before, but for me, with some of my history, touch certain parts of my body, unexpected, and it's a hard trigger for me. And so what I noticed is last time I got triggered like that was about 3 years ago, 3 or 4. But there was no fuel behind it. The trigger was still there. I felt a momentary flashback to child vulnerable. But there was no fuel to carry me through this and create that overwhelming reaction. And that's important.
Okay.
That's important. Cheryl, you got anything? You just processing? You're still chilled. I'm questioning the Qigong before class.
Yeah, not a good idea.
So, does this, when we're looking, how does this affect lungs? I mean, when you think about it, lungs are about boundaries. Boundaries are either held with integrity, or they can, if somebody is trying to compromise my boundaries, I'm either going to surrender, or I'm going to expand and make them move back. And so being able to hold an integrity, this becomes about integrity. If I'm balancing anger and compassion, because neither of these are good or bad. I can be compassionate for the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm. That was me this week.
I can be angry for the wrong reasons. Right? But anger can be a motivator. If I have a mess of a garage and I finally trip over something and bruise my elbow and have an absolute conniption and the garage is empty and clean at the end of the day, then anger has been put to use.
purpose, yeah.
Yeah. So in and of itself, these are not good or bad, these are not good or bad, none of the balance. It's about creating that space where we can work with them. Yeah, Jeannie?
Didn't you say that the lungs were also about voice? Didn't you mention that?
Yeah.
Well, for me, in between the anger and the compassion, the tool is to speak up. Compassion to compassionate leaves me quiet and
Reserved.
submissive to whatever the other person's doing. But if I speak my piece, or I speak just plain old logic, at least I'm balanced between the anger and the compassion, and maybe we can move forward. We can get to a different kind of compassion for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that goes to boundaries. So lungs are the body's access to the outside world. We breathe in air from outside, so it can be vulnerable. When we don't have a strong grounded center, we are vulnerable to outside influence. We can get pushed around. We can, basically our boundary, our inner boundary that's supposed to be, that's enough, is much smaller than it can be, right? Now, the opposite of that is if I were to draw a big circle here and now I'm imposing my will on everybody around me. I'm pushing, being the bully or being, so there's a balance.
Well, those two go together. Somebody who's like this and somebody who's like this is going to match
They
each
can,
other.
yeah. So if you have somebody, here, then you have this really strong personality here that's taking up all this space. This person can feel small unless they have a voice. And so I'll give you an example from my own life of how that shows up. So if, and this never happens, if I'm having a temper tantrum, Fane will make the space smaller. She's not retreating into a shell, she's just giving me space to have my little hissy fit. Unless I start to impose on her boundary, and then she says, I'm not having it. Not in an angry way. What she's learned from me, because if you come at me with anger, hello. So she says her words, beautiful words. I love that she came up with this for herself because it helps me. I'm not in a place where I can have this conversation. And walks away. Didn't make it about me. She didn't make me the victim in that. She didn't say, you're being an ass. She said, I'm not in a place where I can have this conversation right now. Does that make sense? So she held that internal boundary and said, not today, not right now, not for me, not for me. And that leaves me out here with all this loose energy going, but. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it's an ebb and flow, and in a relationship, it's an ebb and flow. There's times when she's got more, she needs more energy, she needs more space, and I have to come into a place of support, right? Like right now, she's taking up space because she's studying for finals, so I'm doing everything I can around her to take other pressures off. So that, in a sense, is the same thing. Our roles have reversed. She's expanding because she needs time for herself, and I'm coming in and taking what I can to relieve that pressure off of her. Does that make sense? So it's an ebb and flow, and boundaries are pliable. They're flexible. They're willing to give space or take up space when they need to. Here, let me help you with that. Or, I think you should do it by yourself.
Social media has put another little twist in this. You're not in the same room as the person, so it might take longer to get to the point where you can use your voice or whatever you need to do.
Social media,
I see it as a turn it off.
Well, yeah, I mean, the hard, fast rule is turn it off, but I need another whiteboard for social media on this. But when you're talking about boundaries, I mean, the thing about social media is the anonymity or the distance that people don't feel like, you know, if they say something, there are people on my Facebook page that say things to me that if they were to say it in front of me, we would probably have a very significant problem.
So turning it off is very good first.
Turning it off, creating space. Anytime that you're feeling, the thing, Cheryl, can I borrow you for a second? The thing about a boundary is if Cheryl is, you know, I'm gonna push on me. So if Cheryl is pushing on me and I can hold space for so long, right? If she keeps coming, I need to either get out of the way to hold my boundary, or like put as much energy as I can, and then it becomes a battle of wills, right? Neither one of us wins in that. Both of us are going to be exhausted over that. But if she keeps pushing and pushing, and I continue to try to fight, and then eventually one of us is going to, if she's pushing me off balance, and I'll just fall, I'll collapse, right? So my boundary's been crashed. Now how do I feel about myself? Right? Whereas if we can coexist and just hold structure, and it's like, okay, you're going that way, that's fine. Now if I go this way, what are you going to do? So we're just moving and doing and coexisting. We can do that all day, right? Thank you. When you think about it from a relationship perspective, mine went off, Kat. You think about it from a relationship perspective, two people standing like that, leaning on each other, codependence. Does that make sense? This person needs this person to be there, and this person needs this person to be there. And without them, if this one decided to step out, what would happen to this one? Boom, gone. I can't live without you. Right? What if I've got this? I've got one person in a relationship that can stand on their own, but the other person is leaning on them hard. What if this one can't walk away? They need this one to hold them up. Right? So if they try to walk away, they're going to fall. This one is going to get exhausted. There's going to be a point where I can't take this anymore. I cannot be everything to you. So ideally, a relationship, a healthy relationship, when we're talking about boundaries and such, is two people that stand in their own space, going back to the boundary thing, where they know where they begin, they know where they end, and they're okay with it. This is my space. And then from there, they choose to spend time together. They choose to be with each other, as opposed to having to be or needing to be. Did that help clarify your questions with this? Okay.
I'm having an issue.
You're having an issue?
I can't figure out how to use this for my issue. Is that the other person, everything's set, and then, oh, it doesn't work for them, so then they want it all changed. Everybody has to change their schedule for that person to have what they want. Instead of just me kowtowing to that, then now I'm just like, okay, I'm not doing it, then no schedule for me. I'm just out. So they're left running in their own circles, or everybody's by themselves because then nothing happened.
What was your truth in that?
that I got to hold my boundaries, like, you don't get to play with my boundaries anymore, I'm done. This was my boundary, and I'm leaving it there, good luck.
Well, that's the other side of this that I didn't share. So if I'm here holding my space, now I want you to grab my wrist and start pulling. And now she's wanting more of my time. So if I don't, I was like, oh, no, I can't. I'm sacrificing myself to get there, right? Whereas if I set my boundaries, I say, you know what, that's enough, right? Because I can overextend myself, overcompensate, over-adapt.
And then that's my fault, I did that, it was my choice.
But that's this scenario here.
Okay.
Unless you need him or her, right? So in that scenario, you're holding space and they're saying, oh, please come to me, do this for me, me. And and you get to a point where it's like, you know what, I'm done. Now, whether they fall or not, up to them. Now, if they fall, typically, then they're going to get angry.
Yeah, in this case, I didn't need them, but if I did need them, then there would have to be more of a back and forth or something.
Right. And the thing about it with relationships, particularly in just boundary setting, and I'm not just talking about partner relationships, I'm talking about friendships and every relationship.
Siblings.
Humans.
Yeah, humans.
There's going to be times where this happens. So there's going to be times when this happens. If, as a volunteer emergency responder, I've been on site when I'm standing with people who's watching their house burn down. They're here. Neither one of them are strong at that point, and they're leaning on each other. So it's not like this is bad. It just can't be sustained and be healthy. Now, sometimes when a trauma happens, this happens. One of them says, I'm going to be the strong one. I'll deal with this later. You can lean on me. Right? But eventually, you want to move back to here. You want to come to a place where both people are good.
And there's life where somebody's too old or too sick or too young or whatever to stand on their own. They need,
So in that situation, you're talking about this. If you're talking about like a
child.
care, child care or an elder care, you're talking about this. And then what has to happen here is you need people you can love and trust and support that are over here on this side.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Support system, groups that you can work with, time out, right? Going and taking them to, like with kids, you take them to daycare, thank God, right? And then they go to school, it's like, yes, school! So, wait a minute, now I got 3 schedules to deal with? At one point with our boys, we got the 3 boys, and at one point we had 3 school schedules, 2 scouting schedules, and then bands or musical instrument schedules for 2 of them. It's like, that was a hard 2 years. So yeah, I mean, in that situation where you've got somebody that definitely needs you, if my dad gets ill, I'm it. I will have to be this, right? I will need fame. I will need my boys. I will need other people in my life to help me through this so that I can help him through this, right? So it's never all or nothing. None of this is all or nothing.
That's why compassionate fatigue is probably the most growing challenge in our country.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've done presentations to caregiver conferences.
Right.
And in doing research for that, the first time I did it, it was Fort Worth, but in doing research for that, I talked to the director and I talked to, I did some research online and such, and back then, it was about 2.5 to 3 years before burnout. And a big part of that is because of this. They did not have the support system behind them to do it. Even the professional caregivers, they would go and they'd spend all day caring for someone that's not their family, and then they would be expected to go home and take care of their family, because the majority of caregivers are women. And that's a huge burden. That's a huge thing.
So did that help Dave breathe?
I don't know, Dave, you still
I
breathing?
don't. I'm not really meaning to be flippant. What I'm thinking is.
Well, you are, lady.
Yes, I know. It's like Richard was saying, it gives you a really wide perspective on why this happens to you, because I can run into that, Dave, where I feel like I'm breathing so shallow. What is the problem, Alice? That it is usually, I know there's pressure, schedules got changed, I'm in the middle of heavy traffic, I've got to be 2 places almost at the same time, but I've got to depend on other people connecting. This is for nanny things. And I mean, it can get really nuts, and that's with one schedule and one child. Well, I also find that, like Dave, what is really happening is it's me. I'm doing it to myself. I'm not handling this the way I normally do because it came up so fast.
Right.
So you have to dig into your resources and your frame of reference and handle it and start breathing deeply, figuring out
the first step
what's
is
going on.
breathing. So,
Yes.
going in, so some of the things going back to Dave's point, and we'll close out, is I know that because I've been dealing with chronic pain for so long, I have a lot of awareness around it, but I know that when my pain levels are up, my breathing changes. I know that when there's pressure of deadlines or something like that, my breathing changes. I know that when I'm concentrating really hard, like when I'm working on a website or programming or something like that, because it's not what I do anymore, but it's what I do, right, as a sideline. I used to do it for a living, and my breathing was all over the charts then, but like I've said before, I had my own ulcer, my own migraines, my own staff of 20, it was all a package set, but now I don't do it every day, I don't program every day, I don't work on websites every day, so I have to really concentrate to get back into that, especially when there's a problem I'm trying to figure out. My breathing gets all sorts of goofy when I'm doing that, and I practice breathing for a living, I teach it for a living. I just taught an hour class at an outpatient clinic on breath work, right?
Yeah.
We just did 30 minutes out there, so it's like, it's because it's still part of the autonomic nervous system, it is still on autopilot. We have to bring it into conscious awareness, the breath I'm talking about. We have to bring it into conscious awareness in order to affect change. And so that's why when something starts to get overwhelming, I step back at least one breath, because that takes me out of here and puts me into here. Yeah.
They teach that in animal communication as if you're the emotional leader in your household, then your animals will follow you. So if you do what you just said, you just take a step back and take one breath, the animals have then the chance to respond. And maybe they need more than one breath, but at least you are the emotional leader then, and everything follows.
I need to try that with the pig. All right, guys, thank you very much for your time and attention.